Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. Today, I want to take you far back in time, beyond the days of skyscrapers and smartphones, before the world knew maps or compasses. Picture a quiet, dusty town under the blazing Middle Eastern sun, where the wind carries the smell of the sea and the sound of waves crashing against a distant shore. Somewhere in that town lives a man named Jonah. He's not a warrior, he's not a king. He's just Jonah, ordinary, yet about to be swept into an extraordinary, almost unbelievable journey. The story of Jonah and the big fish, sometimes called Jonah and the whale, isn't just about a man and a mysterious creature of the deep. It's about choices. It's about running away from something you can't escape. And it's about what happens when the sea itself seems to rise up against you. One quiet afternoon, Jonah hears a voice. Not just any voice. One that seems to come from beyond the wind, beyond the mountains, straight into the very core of his soul. It's a calling, a command. Go to Nineveh, the voice says. Speak to the people there. Warn them before it's too late. The words are clear. The mission is urgent. But Jonah wants nothing to do with it. You might be thinking, why not just do what he's told? But that's the thing about Jonah. He's human. He's afraid. Nineveh is dangerous. Its people fierce and proud. And deep down, Jonah doesn't believe they deserve a warning at all. So instead of going toward the city, he does the opposite. He heads to the port, buys a ticket for the farthest place he can find, and steps onto a ship bound for the edge of the known world. At first, the journey seems smooth. The sky is calm. The sailors share stories under the stars. Jonah feels a strange relief, thinking he's escaped the burden of his mission. But the sea has its own way of finding truth, and you can't run from a calling forever. One night, as the moon hides behind heavy clouds, the wind begins to howl. Waves rise like dark mountains, slamming into the ship. The wooden beams groan. The sailors shout prayers to their gods, tossing cargo overboard to keep from sinking. Jonah stands frozen, the taste of salt on his lips, the roar of the storm in his ears. And deep inside, he knows. This isn't just bad weather. This is meant for him. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating Jonah's pale face. The sailors demand answers. Who are you? Why is this happening? Jonah swallows hard. His heart pounds. The truth presses against his lips, but the storm grows fiercer, as if time itself is running out. And then, somewhere in the deep, beyond the crashing waves, something stirs. Something massive. Something alive. The wind screamed through the rigging as the ship lurched sideways, throwing sailors to the deck. Rain pelted their faces like tiny stones, stinging with every drop. Jonah clung to the railing, his knuckles white, the taste of fear bitter in his mouth. He could feel the ship shudder under him, as though the sea itself was trying to tear it apart. The men around him shouted in different tongues, each calling to their own gods, but nothing seemed to calm the raging waters. Somewhere inside, Jonah knew why. This wasn't just a storm. This was a storm with a purpose. Hours earlier, he had walked onto this very ship with the confidence of a man who believed he had escaped his fate. He'd avoided familiar faces in the marketplace, hurried through the port before anyone could ask questions, and stepped aboard with only a small pack of belongings. He'd told himself that Tarshish, so far, so distant, would be the end of his worries. The further he sailed from Nineveh, the further he sailed from the command that weighed on him like an anchor. But now, under the shadow of this monstrous storm, that belief felt fragile, almost foolish. The sailors, hardened men who had faced tempests before, were beginning to look at Jonah differently. They saw the way his eyes refused to meet theirs, the way his hands trembled, not from the cold, but from something deeper. The captain, soaked through to the bone, staggered toward him, gripping the mast for balance. "Pray to your God," he shouted above the roar of the wind. Maybe he will hear you and save us. Jonah's stomach twisted. Pray? To the very one he was running from? The thought burned in his chest. The sea's fury only grew. Waves slammed into the deck, dragging ropes and barrels into the churning darkness below. The air smelled of salt and fear. Jonah could hear the timbers of the ship creaking, as if each groan might be its last. The crew began casting lots, desperate to find out who had brought this curse upon them. Each man watched the bone dice tumble across the wet planks, hearts pounding. And then they stopped, pointing, without question, to Jonah. The men closed in, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and anger. "What have you done?" one demanded. Jonah opened his mouth, but for a moment no sound came. Somewhere beyond the spray and the darkness, a deep rumble echoed. Not thunder, not wind, but something heavier, something from beneath. The deck shifted again, violently, and Jonah stumbled, gripping the side. In the depths below, unseen, the water swirled with a strange, deliberate motion, as if something vast was circling, waiting. The sailors tightened their circle around Jonah, their faces pale in the flashes of lightning. The ship pitched hard to one side, and one man nearly went overboard before another grabbed his arm. "Tell us who you are," the captain demanded, his voice raw from shouting. Jonah's eyes darted from face to face. He could see the fear there, the kind that makes men desperate enough to do anything. Finally, Jonah spoke, his voice barely audible over the storm. "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." The words hung in the air for a moment, more frightening to the sailors than the thunder. If Jonah's God made the very waters they sailed on, then he had the power to end them all. The men exchanged looks, a silent understanding passing between them. This wasn't just bad luck. This was divine anger. The ship groaned again, and a mast line snapped, whipping through the rain like a serpent. One sailor yelled that they should turn back, but another shouted over him, saying the waves were too strong. The argument rose above the storm, each man desperate to find a solution that might save them. Some wanted to throw Jonah overboard. Others feared that doing so would anger his God even more. All the while, Jonah stood motionless, his wet clothes clinging to him. Guilt pressed heavier than the wind. He thought of Nineveh, of the people he refused to warn, and the choice that had brought them here. Beneath their feet, the sea churned in a slow, deliberate rhythm, as if something massive was circling closer. Every man felt it now. This wasn't just a storm. Something unseen was part of it, and it was waiting for the right moment to strike. The storm was no longer just above them. It felt alive, as if the sea and sky had conspired together. Rain hammered the deck so hard it blurred the world into streaks of gray. Waves rose higher than the mast, their foaming crests glowing white in the flashes of lightning. Every crash against the hull made the ship tremble like a living thing in pain. The sailors shouted to each other, voices cracking under the weight of panic. Ropes were tossed, sails ripped, and barrels rolled across the deck, slamming into anything in their path. Jonah could barely keep his footing. Each time the ship dropped into a deep trough between waves, his stomach lurched as though the ocean meant to swallow them whole. The captain seized Jonah by the shoulders, shaking him. "If your God can stop this, tell us what to do." Jonah's eyes dropped to the dark water swirling beside the ship. The motion was too controlled, too steady for chaos. Something was moving down there, something bigger than the storm itself. He could almost feel its presence, like a shadow pressing up from the depths. A sudden roar of wind knocked several men to the deck. One sailor screamed as the mainsail tore free and vanished into the black sky. The ship pitched violently, wood splintering under the strain. The men gripped the rails, their faces pale as death. Even the most seasoned among them looked ready to collapse. Jonah's heart pounded in his ears. He knew this couldn't go on much longer. The sea was pulling them toward something, some unseen fate. and every moment felt like the last calm breath before the plunge. Then from deep below came a sound, low, resonant, and impossibly vast, that froze every man in place. The sound from beneath was unlike anything the sailors had ever heard. It wasn't just noise, it was a vibration that rattled their bones and seemed to throb in the very planks of the ship. Some men clamped their hands over their ears, while others froze, eyes wide, as if they'd just heard a voice from another world. Then, as quickly as it came, the sound faded into the hiss of rain and the crash of waves, leaving only the pounding of their hearts. Before anyone could speak, the ship jerked violently to one side. It wasn't the push of a wave. This was a pull, sudden and deliberate, as though something enormous had taken hold of them from below. Barrels toppled, ropes slid, and men tumbled across the deck. The captain shouted for the anchor to be cut, but the sailors hesitated. None of them wanted to put their hands into the dark water, where that thing waited unseen. Jonah gripped the rail and peered over the side. For just a moment, he thought he saw movement, something impossibly large gliding just beneath the surface, a shape that blotted out the glow of the lightning above. His breath caught. If what he suspected was true, this was no ordinary sea creature. This was something sent. The wind howled harder, whipping loose ropes into the air like snakes. A wave surged over the bow, sweeping one sailor toward the edge. 3 men lunged to grab him, their boots slipping on the slick wood. The struggle was chaotic, desperate, and in that chaos, Jonah noticed something even more chilling. The pull on the ship wasn't constant anymore. It came in steady, rhythmic tugs, as if the thing below was circling them tighter and tighter. The men's voices grew frantic. Some screamed to turn back toward shore. Others yelled to row with all their strength. But the captain's face said what no one dared admit. They weren't in control anymore. The ship was being herded. Lightning split the sky again, revealing the waves in stark, blinding white. For just an instant, Jonah thought he saw a great gaping mouth break the surface far off the port side, too large to be real, too fast to be certain. Then the darkness swallowed it again. The storm showed no mercy, the wind shrieking like 1,000 voices. Jonah's pulse thundered in his ears. Whatever waited beneath them was drawing closer, and now it wasn't just the storm they had to survive. It was whatever had chosen Jonah as its target. Another wave slammed into the side, nearly tossing Jonah from his feet. The ship's timbers screamed under the pressure, and the rain blurred the line between sea and sky. The sailors were exhausted, their arms shaking from hauling ropes and bailing water, yet the pull from beneath grew stronger, more insistent. Jonah knew there was no outrunning this. He turned to the captain, water streaming down his face. "It's me!" Jonah shouted over the wind. "This storm, this creature, it's after me. If I stay aboard, we all die." The captain stared at him, jaw clenched, searching for any sign of a lie. But Jonah's eyes held only grim certainty. The men hesitated, torn between disbelief and desperation, until another violent lurch of the ship made the choice for them. They moved quickly, grabbing Jonah's arms. The sea roared louder, as if sensing what was about to happen. Jonah didn't fight them. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, like a man resigned to his fate. They dragged him to the rail, the deck pitching beneath their boots. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, Jonah thought he saw that dark, monstrous shape rising from the depths, closer than ever. With one final heave, they cast him into the waves. The cold hit like a wall, stealing his breath. The moment his body struck the water, everything changed. The wind dropped. The rain softened. The ship, though battered, steadied itself on the calmer swells. The men clung to the rails, staring into the deep, unable to speak. Jonah sank into the darkness, bubbles streaming past his face. Then it came, the massive shadow filling his vision. A great mouth opened around him, and before he could take another breath, the world went black. Inside, he was not crushed or torn apart. Instead, a strange stillness wrapped around him. The air was heavy but breathable. The sound of the storm outside faded, replaced by a low, rhythmic thrum, like the heartbeat of the creature itself. Jonah realized he was alive, for now. And then, from somewhere deep within that living prison, a voice whispered, not the storms, not the sailors, but the same one that had sent him to Nineveh. Only this time, it said something new. This is not the end, Jonah. It is only the beginning. Jonah sat in the darkness, unsure of how long he had been there. Time felt strange inside the great fish. Sometimes he thought hours had passed, other times only minutes. The walls around him shifted gently with the creature's movements, and he could hear the slow push of water outside. It was unlike anything he had imagined, neither a tomb nor a place of peace, but a space for thinking, for listening. At first, his mind was filled with fear. The memory of the storm, the shouts of the sailors, the sight of that massive shadow, it all played over and over. But gradually, another thought began to take its place. He remembered the voice that had sent him to Nineveh. He remembered the people he had been so quick to judge, the city he had turned his back on. And now, swallowed by the depths, he could no longer run. Jonah began to pray, not with the bargaining of a desperate man, but with the humility of one who understood he had been given another chance. He admitted his fear, his stubbornness, his pride. He asked for strength to do what he had refused before. In the silence that followed, he felt the presence of the one he had tried to escape. It was not angry, it was steady, patient, and unshakable. On the third day, the great fish rose. Jonah felt the shift as the water churned faster. Light began to filter into the darkness, and he braced himself as the creature surged toward the surface. In one powerful motion it released him, casting him onto a quiet shore. Jonah lay there for a long time, the sun warm on his face, the air still carrying the salt of the sea. He was alive. The storm was over, but its lesson stayed with him. He knew where he had to go next. Nineveh was waiting, not for a man without fear, but for one willing to face it. As he rose and took his first steps toward the road ahead, Jonah glanced back at the sea. The waves rolled calmly, hiding the depths where his life had changed forever. Somewhere out there, the great fish swam on, its part in the story complete. And Jonah, once a man running from his calling, now walked toward it, carrying the memory of the storm, the sea, and the second chance he would never forget.